Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dr. Dawn Krim. I serve as the Vice Chancellor for Advancement, Community Engagement, and Inclusivity here at UW Green Bay. And I am excited to welcome you all to this wonderful talk and moderated panel, especially since we know it's the end of the semester. We know in just 7 days we are moving into the NFL draft, so we are indeed on the clock. And there are two other water events tonight. The Clean Water Action Council Dine and Bid for the Environment in Green Bay, and the Fish Tales Lecture Series in Sturgeon Bay. Wow, who knew? It's all about water today. We like to begin our programs first with the land acknowledgement. That is our custom. We at the University of Wisconsin, Green Bay, acknowledge the First Nations people who are the original inhabitants of the region. The Ho-Chunk Nation and the Menominee Nation are the original first people of Wisconsin, and both nations have ancient historical and spiritual connections to the land that our institution now resides upon. Today, Wisconsin is home to 12 First Nation communities, including the Oneida Nation of Wisconsin, the Forest County Potawatomi, Ojibwe Nation communities, Stockbridge Munsee Community Band of Mohican Indians, and the Brotherton Indian Nation. We acknowledge the First Nations people of Wisconsin. The Thompson Center is delighted to be able to sponsor today's event and partner with UW Green Bay. Thank you to the UW Green Bay team, as well as the Thompson Center staff, Alex, Ruth, and Lily. For those unfamiliar with the Thompson Center, let me say a few words about it. The Thompson Center was established to follow in the footsteps of Governor Tommy Thompson, who proudly worked with colleagues across both sides of the aisle to engage and advance the public good. The Thompson Center seeks to carry on Governor Thompson's legacy by informing and inspiring current and future public leaders, fostering leadership skills, and promoting effective public leadership. They work to further these goals by offering these public events, funding research and scholarships, and honoring exemplary leaders with the Distinguished Public Leadership Award. And they conduct other activities across all UW campuses. And all of the events are free and open to the public. So for more information on their upcoming events, grant opportunities, and other aspects of the center, please visit the Thompson Center website. Now on to our program. Our program this afternoon features our keynote speaker, Peter Annan, Director of the Mary Griggs Burke Center for Freshwater Innovation at Northland College, followed by a panel discussion that'll be moderated by our very own Matt Dornbush, the Dean of the Cochran School of Business at UW Green Bay. It will include panel members Lisa Bauer-Lotto, who's the Corporate Director of Environment and Sustainability at Green Bay Packaging, Troy Struckenbach, the Brown County Executive, and of course, our keynote speaker, Peter Annan. Peter Annan, a veteran conflict and environmental journalist. Peter Annan spent more than a decade reporting on a wide range of issues for Newsweek. For many years, he specialized in coverage of domestic terrorism and other conflicts, including the bombing of the federal building in Oklahoma City and the Branch Davidian standoff outside of Waco, Texas. He has also spent years writing about the environment, including the droughts in the Southwest, hurricanes in the Southeast, wind power on the Great Plains, and the causes and consequences of the dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico. After his time at Newsweek, Annan became an associate director of the Institute for Journalism and Natural Resources, a nonpartisan national nonprofit that organizes educational fellowships for mid-career environmental journalists. In September 2006, he published his first book, The Great Lakes Water Wars, which has been called the definitive work on the Great Lakes water diversion controversy and received the Great Lakes Book Award for Nonfiction in 2007. From 2010 to 2015, Anand served as managing director of the University of Notre Dame's Environmental Change Initiative, which targets the interrelated problems of invasive species, land use, and climate change, focusing on their synergistic impacts on water resources. In 2018, Annan published an extensively revised and updated edition of Water Wars, which was recognized with a Great Lakes Leadership Award in Communication Excellence from the Great Lakes Protection Fund in 2020. He currently serves as the director of the Mary Griggs Burke Center for Freshwater Innovation at Northland College in Ashland, Wisconsin. He has a bachelor's degree in journalism from the University of Wisconsin in Madison and a master's in international affairs from Columbia University in New York. After Peter's talk and the panel discussion, please join us for a program of book signings, hors d'oeuvres, and a hosted bar in the Mary Ann Coffran Hall, and we'll all go there together. But without further ado, please help me welcome Peter Annan.
Thank you, Dr. Krim, for that kind introduction. I also want to thank Emily Tyner for working for months with me to set up this talk, and then Dean Dornbush as well. We had a meeting earlier and we solved all the world's problems in about a half an hour, so everyone can rest easy. So I always start my talks with a quick audience poll gauging the Great Lakesness of my audience. It's sort of a silly stand-up, sit-down thing, but hang with me, you'll see where I'm going. So everyone stand up who has visited at least one North American Great Lake, which should be everybody in the room because there's one right out the door. Remain standing if you visited 2, 3, 4, and all 5. All right, very good. We're not done. Stand if you have immersed yourself in at least one North American Great Lake. This is the last stand up, so don't worry. We're talking full body immersion. You've immersed yourself in 2 North American Great Lakes, 3, 4, and all 5. All right, let's give them a round of applause. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to talk a lot about the Great Lakes today, but also water in general. The thesis of my talk is that the Great Lakes region, the North American continent, and the entire world are all entering a period of increased water tension. Those tensions are primarily driven by water scarcity, and they're expected to put increased pressure on water-rich regions of the world, like the North American Great Lakes. Consequently, the leadership in the Great Lakes region has come up with a world-class, modern, binding water management system to protect this internationally significant resource as we enter a period of increasing global water insecurity. And that is the Great Lakes Compact, which was released in 2005 and then adopted in 2008, which bans diversions from the Great Lakes watershed, with very limited exceptions, which we're going to talk about more later. But first, let's look at the global water picture, which is grim and predicted to get grimmer. There's a lot of water on the grade school globe, but only 1% of that water is accessible, drinkable, fresh water. 800 million people around the world today lack access to clean drinking water, according to the United Nations. 2 million die annually from unhealthy water conditions. And again, according to the UN, global water demand is expected to surge by 55% by the year 2050. You can see all the hot spots here on the map, including some of the hottest spots here in the United States. So let's visit some of those. We have the Klamath River watershed in southern Oregon. Northern California has been the scene of a really heated Endangered Species Act dispute that's carried on for decades now. Of course, we know California has a year-round fire season, and LA, of course, being devastated earlier this year. The Colorado River watershed, the most oversubscribed watershed in the United States, so oversubscribed that it rarely flows to the sea anymore. The Rio Grande River between the United States and Mexico is a source of continuing contention between the two countries, despite a treaty designed to manage that tension. And then we have the Oglala Aquifer in the central part of the country, the largest aquifer in the lower 48, down more than 150 feet in some areas and is only recharging at 2 inches per year. And then we have the Apalachicola Flint River Basin in the southeast. Georgia, Florida, and Alabama have been suing each other for years over water in that watershed. And then on a little bit lower level of tension, there was a Supreme Court case, believe it or not, in the Potomac River several years ago. And then the Ipswich River outside of Boston has been known at times to run dry during the summer lawn watering season. So I don't mean to equate the Ipswich River situation with really the dire situation in the Colorado River, but if you look at those red circles from the perspective of the Great Lakes watershed, you can see that the Great Lakes are surrounded by tension on the southwest and east sides. And it is this tension that tends to drive the Great Lakes water diversion debate, controversy, and concern. And so do big projects like this that were proposed in the 1960s. This is the North American Water and Power Alliance, or NWAPA, just a remarkable idea from today's perspective. This is from the Ralph M. Parsons Company of Southern California. The idea was to dam up large Arctic rivers in Alaska, Northwest Territories, and Yukon, send that water down to the Rocky Mountain Trench in British Columbia. And at the time, in the early 1960s, the Great Lakes were actually suffering from really low water levels. So to increase the geographic support for NWAPA, they were actually going to kick some water to the Great Lakes, but the ultimate goal was to send that Arctic water down to the southwest where the Ralph M. Parsons Company was based and still is based. And at roughly the same time, we have a Canadian version of NWAPA. This is called the Grand Canal Proposed Distribution System. It was not the same idea, it was a different idea, and they like to differentiate themselves from NWAPA. But the idea here, we're looking at Hudson's Bay. That's James Bay in the southeast corner. There's a red line there. The idea was to put a big dam there where there's a series of islands and allow the large Arctic Canadian streams there to transform James Bay into a freshwater system instead of a saltwater system, then canal that water down to northern Lake Huron, thereby making the outflow of Lake Superior superfluous. So we're going to send the equivalent of the St. Mary's River to the east into the Canadian prairies and then ultimately down into the southwest United States, much like NWAPA was. This was the one that freaked out people in the Great Lakes region the most, but both of these ideas, I mean, just think about it, is replumbing the North American continent. And so this was at a time when the dam building era was really in its heyday, and this was this last big reach. And these proposals eventually died under their own fiscal weight, enormously expensive, but also their environmental and ecological weight as well. But the fear has always been that in a time of crisis or a time of big tension, that these plans would be dusted off and versions of them might be revived, and that the Great Lakes in particular might suffer or be victimized from that. So, all right, we had a quick glance at the global situation. We had a quick glance at the North American water situation. Now we're zeroing in on my favorite part, the Great Lakes themselves. So zero in, if you will, in that kind of aqua shaded area. That's the Great Lakes watershed. That's the Great Lakes Basin. Think of it as a soup bowl rim that surrounds the Great Lakes. rainfall, snowfall, groundwater recharge that occurs within that soup bowl rim is the secret to water sustainability in the Great Lakes watershed. Look how far the edge of the watershed is from the shoreline in some areas, and then how truly remarkably narrow the gap is between the shoreline and the watershed line in other areas of the Great Lakes watershed. It is these areas where the shoreline is closest to the watershed line that water tensions in the Great Lakes region are highest. And yes, despite the abundance that we have here, there is plenty of water tension in the Great Lakes region, which we're going to talk about. But first, super cool Great Lakes stats. They hold 20% of all the fresh surface water on the planet. Really, really remarkable. And that's enough volume to cover the lower 48 states in nearly 10 feet of water, according to the Environmental Protection Agency. Just a remarkable stat. Key stat today, though, only 1% of the water in the Great Lakes watershed is renewed annually through rainfall, snowfall, and groundwater recharge. So think of the Great Lakes as this gift from the glaciers 10,000 years ago, this water bank account deposited in the heart of the North American continent, and you have this 1% of water interest that flows through that bank account annually. And of course, we don't want to be consuming more than our 1% of interest and start diving into the principle of that water bank account. We're not even close, I'm happy to say, but we could continue to do a better job of keeping track of that consumption. So the Great Lakes nourish 35, 40 million people in the United States and Canada, billions of creatures in a really unique and fragile cold water ecosystem. And this is not very well known, very relevant to our conversation today. The regional economy in the Great Lakes region is the world's third largest after the United States and after China. The 8 Great Lakes states and the 2 Canadian provinces are the third largest economy, $6 trillion in the world, and much, though not all, of that economy is water dependent. Okay, now, this is that same Great Lakes map with all these big orange triangles on it and some small orange triangles on it. This is published by the International Joint Commission, a body created by the federal governments of the United States and Canada to resolve transboundary water disputes all along the U.S.-Canadian border. And this is a report showing all the human poking and prodding that has occurred in the soup bowl rim during the last 200 years. These are all diversions. Some of them are big, represented by big arrows. Some of them are small. Some of them are givers. Some of them are takers. And you can see there's 2 big givers on north side of Lake Superior in Canada and 1 big taker in Chicago we're going to talk about. And so according to the International Joint Commission, there have been 8 inter-basin diversions piercing the soup bowl rim. There have also been 6 intra-basin diversions that artificially transport Great Lakes water from one lake to another within the soup bowl rim, like the Welland Canal, which bypasses Niagara Falls so the saltwater shipping vessels can reach ports like Green Bay, Duluth, Chicago, etc. The biggest, baddest, most controversial Great Lakes diversion of them all is in the city of Chicago, known as the Illinois diversion, or Chicago diversion of 1900. Why is this here? Go back to the late 1800s, you have the Great Chicago Fire, torches much of the downtown area. The city embarks on this massive effort to rebuild itself. It becomes this booming metropolis of 1 million people out on the prairie, and it's growing so fast that the city's water intake structure cannot keep up with the growing demand. There's outhouses throughout the city. There's open sewage in the streets in some areas. Really hard to fathom the size of the stockyards on the south side of the city at that time. You had all the animal waste while the animals are being waiting to be slaughtered. Then you have all the slaughterhouse waste that's washing, all of this is washing into the Chicago River. Anecdotal evidence of the river crusting over with filth and chickens and cats running across that crust. And then you have this big storm event that flushes all this filth out into Lake Michigan, and boat captains and fishermen would come into the wharves reporting this grotesque sewage slick with dead animals in it floating out towards the city's water intake structures, which are still visible today 2 miles offshore. So the city became paranoid that its unsustainable water management practices were going to pollute its drinking water supply. So it embarks on this multi-year effort to lower the grade in the upper stretches of the Chicago River and connect it to this 26-mile canal to reverse the flow of the Chicago River and send Lake Michigan water into the river, into this canal, into the Des Plaines River, into the Illinois River, and ultimately the Mississippi. So this is literally a Panama Canal-like kind of engineering project. So the Chicago's solution was to flush its sewage to St. Louis. St. Louis was not thrilled, as you might imagine. The state of Missouri tried to stop this by filing suit. It didn't work out. So then the state of Wisconsin filed suit, and that case was more successful than the state of Missouri. The case is called Wisconsin et al. Versus the state of Illinois, and the other et al. Is most of the other Great Lakes states who are really alarmed at the water level impacts of this engineering project. The maximum capacity is 10,000 cubic feet per second, which is a good-sized river. And it's the most litigated and, as I said, controversial water diversion project in the Great Lakes region. And so many people don't realize, you go down, next time you're in Chicago, down to Michigan Avenue Bridge, look down on that river, and it's beautiful blue-green Great Lakes water. It's not your normal muddy, brown, gray urban river. That's because it's Lake Michigan water going the other way. This, based on a U.S. Supreme Court decision from that Wisconsin et al. Case, 1967, set the limit of this water diversion at 2.1 billion gallons per day. So yes, 2.1 billion gallons of Lake Michigan water flows to the Gulf of Mexico every day through metropolitan Chicago because of this one diversion. And so this one diversion lowered water levels on Lakes Michigan and Huron, which hydrologically are one lake despite the two names, by 2.5 inches. 2.5 inches doesn't sound like a lot, but in low water level periods, which many of you are probably familiar with, inches really do matter, especially the shipping industry and things like that, having to dredge harbors and connecting channels. But the issue is, if this one diversion were replicated a half a dozen times, we would be talking about feet. And feet really matter during low water periods in the Great Lakes region. So today, this is seen as sort of the poster child of bad behavior in terms of the Great Lakes water diversion controversy. On the other hand, you could make the case that Chicago might not be the global city that it is today if it didn't have this water diversion, and therein lies the kind of tension in the water diversion debate. So next time you're in Chicago, check out the river a little more closely. So that's a controversial water diversion from the beginning of the last century. And here's a controversial Canadian water diversion proposal from the end of the last century. This is the NOVA proposal of 1998. A small, unknown consulting firm in Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario, hatches a plan to tanker pristine Lake Superior water to Asia to try and solve the global water crisis. It's an effort to try and solve the global water crisis. 158 million gallons from Lake Superior to Asia annually. And the company received a permit from the province of Ontario and then sent out press releases about it, and the region freaked out. And the region freaked out because the proposal could not be stopped by laws in Canada. It could have been stopped by laws in the United States, but United States laws don't apply to Canada, at least not yet. And so, that's a bad joke, sorry. And so, but the lawyers said, if you can't stop this diversion, it's already been permitted and it's setting a precedent to send water to Asia, where can't you send Great Lakes water? The lawyers were really concerned, which meant the governors were concerned and the provincial premiers were concerned. So 158 million gallons is not that much water in Lake Superior. 3 quadrillion gallons, give or take a trillion, right? It's almost immeasurable. But again, it's the legal precedent thing with this water diversion issue. And so it's, and again, because it was international in particular, so there was politicians grandstanding on the Canadian side of the border, wanting this whole thing to be shut down, American side of the border. The International Joint Commission, which I've already referenced, held listening sessions all around the Great Lakes region to allow people to just come out and vent their anger about this precedent-setting water diversion that's caught everybody off guard. And so NOVA raised really serious questions about the adequacy of the Great Lakes water management laws in the region at the time. And so we had this situation where there's a lot of paranoia, but not enough paranoia to get people to act. Well, NOVA was the classic straw that broke the camel's back. 7 years later in Milwaukee, the Great Lakes Compact is released. 7 years of laborious, really, really specific legal negotiations over the wording of the Great Lakes Compact. You can see Governor Doyle here at the time was the co-chair of the Council of Great Lakes Governors with Governor Taft from Ohio, and then Provincial Premier Dalton McGuinty from Ontario came to Milwaukee for the signing ceremony, and then all the other jurisdictions in the Great Lakes region are represented by staff behind those three executives. But here's the situation. In 2005, the compact is just a piece of paper. It's not actually a regulatory instrument at the time. To become regulatory and binding, it has to then be adopted by all 8 Great Lakes legislatures, then be adopted by Congress, and then be signed by the president. Huge hurdles in each and of themselves. At the time, I was quoted saying that it probably had a 50-50 chance of happening. To my surprise and the surprise of many others, in 3 years, the compact made it through all 8 legislatures and was signed by, adopted by Congress and signed by President Bush on October 3rd, 2008. Ontario adopted companion agreements in 2007, Quebec in 2009, thereby, and they don't do compacts in Canada, so one of the challenges was how do you envelop this international boundary water in the same anti-water diversion regulations, despite the fact that it's transected by this international border. And so this is the way they figured it out. Compact on the US side, agreements in Ontario and Quebec, and thereby we have this globally significant water body protected. Truly remarkable bipartisan agreement. This is a bipartisan issue in the Great Lakes region, and the Great Lakes generally are a really amazing bipartisan issue as well. So it's now seen as a global model for international transboundary water management. And here are just, I think, some of the coolest things about what was achieved here. They created a forward-looking, bipartisan, binational agreement adopted on behalf of future generations in the absence of a crisis. When's the last time you heard all those words stitched together? It's really, truly remarkable what happened with the Great Lakes Compact. So, again, the compact is a ban on diversions with limited exceptions. I'm not going to geek out with the fine print here, but basically if you're a community that sits right on the edge of the soup bowl rim, or you're in a county that sits right on the edge of the soup bowl rim, you have a right to ask for a limited water diversion. Then you have to clean the water to Clean Water Act standards and send it back to the Great Lakes, so there's no net loss. These are called straddling communities and straddling counties. If you're not right on the edge of the soup bowl rim, you don't have a ticket to the dance. You can't even request a Great Lakes water diversion. And it's just, that was the big thing that the compact did, was this ban on diversions, except for these very limited exceptions, like I said, communities and counties. And so 7 of the 8 Great Lakes states have denied water from the Great Lakes to their state capitals. So they're actually denying water to some of their own citizens, what the lawyers told them they had to do in order to deny water to other areas of the country as well. The straddling cities only need the local governor's approval, but a straddling county community like Waukesha needs the approval of all 8 Great Lakes governors. So a super high bar, even though you're near the edge of the boundary, there's still a super high bar. And again, if you're not near the boundary, it's all over. So where's the front line in the Great Lakes water war? Really kind of amazing. Wisconsin has more water diversion hotspots than all the other Great Lakes states combined. That southeast corner, south of Milwaukee, north of Chicago here, you can see Waukesha was the most famous case of the compact. New Berlin, Menominee Falls, Foxconn needed a water diversion through the city of Racine, Kenosha, and Pleasant Prairie, et cetera. Chicago, we've already talked about. And then way down there, Lowell, Indiana is the only community that's ever been denied a Great Lakes water diversion under a prior pre-compact regulatory system. So Again, Chicago being the biggest in this whole area and most litigated, but there's plenty of controversy to go around. So this whole Milwaukee, Chicago mega city, as it's sometimes called, which is going to continue to fill in with development between those two cities, there's not great water there. And so we're going to continue to hear more about water tension in that part of the Great Lakes watershed, of course, which is all part of Lake Michigan, along with all of you. So this really is the front line, the real tension spot in the Great Lakes region. So the compact's key philosophical underpinnings, which people don't talk about that much, is that the region really needs to continue to be this global leader in sustainable transboundary water use and water management. Again, the compact reserved the vast majority of the water for the environment, which is the complete opposite of the Colorado River Compact, where the humans have taken claims to all the water and there's therefore not enough for the environment. And then we need to use the water sustainably, but to our competitive economic advantage. It's not just an environmental document, it's a social and economic document as well. And we are trying to bring the jobs to the water rather than send the water to jobs somewhere else. Really key philosophical underpinning here. So nevertheless, the water envy will continue. Here's a headline from the New York Times that Emily and I talked about not long after it came out. And these the alarming proposals, the magnetism of these water bodies is so great, people can't not think about taking it and sending it somewhere else. This is from August 15th, 2024, again in the New York Times. Don't take the bait. The lakes are protected because of the compact. These are people who are suggesting things that don't have the familiarity. But again, we do need to practice what we preach in terms of water sustainability, because we can't waste water here recklessly and claim it for us, and because we then look like unworthy stewards to people in other parts of the country. So then the latest scare, again in the New York Times, came just last month, where the New York Times had this big scoop in the debate between Canada and the United States. Not the debate, the dispute, I guess would be a better way to put it. And the New York Times reported that Mr. Trump also mentioned revisiting the sharing of lakes and rivers between the U.S. and Canada, which is regulated by a number of treaties, which is true. It's not just the compact. He wanted to tear up the Great Lakes agreements and conventions between the two nations that lay out how they share and manage Lake Superior, Huron, Erie, and Ontario. Michigan's not on the list. Michigan's wholly within the borders of the United States. And so the lawyers say it's an American lake. The hydrologists say, as I said, it's one lake. And so that's a whole nother legal battle. But that's why Lake Michigan's not mentioned here. And look, I'm one of the last nonpartisan journalists in the United States. This is not a partisan comment, but this freaked people out when it showed up in the New York Times last month. A lot of stories about, oh my God, what's going to happen to the compact? Well, the brilliance of the compact's design is really quite bulletproof. If you were to tear up that agreement with Canada, which said, Canadian provinces, you do this, and the United States, we're going to do this, well, that's all done. So you could tear up the agreement with the United States and Canada, and the compact will still stand, as will the rules preventing diversions in Ontario, Quebec would still stand as well. The lawyers who reviewed the compact would fill this room probably. So it's really, worked really hard. And so again, these anti-diversion policies on both sides of the border. And then it's also important to realize that a U.S. compact has never been unwound without the agreement of the representative states. And so the Great Lakes states, a majority of them would have to sign off on the unwinding of the Great Lakes Compact. So again, don't take the bait. The lakes are looking really good here. Then I want to talk a little bit more about climate change and the future and potential climate migration of the Great Lakes region. This is a story from the New York Times in 2019, pivoting a little bit here, and it was doing a story about which cities in the United States would be the most resilient under climate change. And they had a Harvard professor who said that Duluth, Minnesota, declared Duluth, Minnesota to be the most climate resilient city in the United States. And then what's happening is that the Great Lakes region in general is taking that and expanding it, and the Great Lakes region sees itself as one of the most climate resilient parts of the country. And so that leads to then a conversation. Well, will people come here? Will people migrate here because of the water and because of the climate resiliency, et cetera? And that's a conversation that's happening throughout the region right now. So, take-home points. Overall, the compact is working as expected. People always talk about diverting water from the Great Lakes, but the lakes have never been better protected from long-range, large-scale water diversions. The region needs to remain vigilant to ensure that precedents aren't set that are regretted later, but more local return flow diversion proposals, like from Waukesha under Berlin, et cetera, are going to happen. That's inevitable. That's an anticipated part of the process, but the process has been working, and it's set up to take care of that. But thanks to years of bipartisan regional groundwork, a system is in place to deal with future water diversion controversies. We need to continue to use our competitive advantage as a region to bring these jobs to the water rather than send water to jobs elsewhere. And then a few others. We also need, again, to be this global role model and thought leaders in water stewardship in the region. The compact is riddled with sustainability requirements. It really is a great document in that regard. We do have a lot of great thought water leadership in the Milwaukee Water Council, also the Chicago Current. Got a NSF award, Innovation Engine Award, $160 million award to look at these kind of water technologies and innovation and practices as well. But this needs to be happening in Green Bay, Duluth, Thunder Bay, Buffalo, et cetera. It just shouldn't be limited to certain areas, and that's what we're going to talk about, I think, a little bit more on the panel here. So if we get this right, we can really set up the blue economy in the Great Lakes region for years to come, which sounds a lot better than Rust Belt to me. Really super attentive audience. That's all I have. Thank you all very much. Thank you.
There we go. All right. So we're going to have our panel come up and join us now. Thank you, Peter. That was really great. Thank you so much. So again, our panelists are, we have Lisa down there at the end. We all have met Peter now, and then Troy Streckenbach, of course, the county exec. I'm Matt Dornbush, Dean of the Kaufman School of Business. I'm going to, first of all, thanks, Peter, for setting up what I hope we can do in the last 45 minutes here. So I'm going to give a little background on why we're here. Today's a really exciting day for me. This is exactly what I want to start having. We've got a industry leader in water and knowing how to use water efficiently and effectively and sustainably. We've got a sort of I'd say a global expert on water at a high level, international, national policy, thinking big things about water and how it fits into our lives. And then, we've got a long-term, very effective local leader who's thinking about how do we use water to make Green Bay a better place. And so to kind of lead into our questions, I'm going to tell a story. I'm not originally from here. I came to Green Bay to work here at UW Green Bay in 2005. So I hate to admit it, but 20 years ago. So I'm starting to date myself. I was, at the time, living in central Iowa, and what they call rivers there are not rivers. They're these little bitty, like, creeks and streams, and I grew up, in Illinois, and I spent a lot of time in the Mississippi River. So when I moved to Iowa, that was a bit of a shock for me, to go from water to these little things that they're not rivers, right? So when we were moving here, I got my job. My wife was here looking for a job in industry. I dropped her off in an interview, and my mind was instantly, right, oh man, this is the world's largest freshwater estuary. It's on the Great Lakes. I grew up, I was a river kid. I can't wait. While she's doing these interviews, I'm going to go and check out Green Bay. I'm so excited. And my first real lesson coming to Green Bay was that, first of all, nobody considers Green Bay part of Lake Michigan here, right? Oh no, that's Green Bay. That's not Lake Michigan. Okay, so they start to discount it. Second, there was nowhere to really access Green Bay, Lake Michigan, from this community. I looked and I looked and I looked, and 20 years ago, there was one park, and at that time, it's still here, right? But it was not very well kept. It was a little bit seedy, to say the least, and I didn't feel totally comfortable being there at the time. They've put some improvements in it and so forth. But right then, right, for me, a newcomer to the community, right? I look out when you drive over Tower Bridge and I saw 20% of the world's fresh water, a global icon that any school child in the world can point out on a map, right? And I'm in a community then, right, that's there because of the water, that there have been people here for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. The entire economy, which most people don't recognize, is built upon that water, yet there's no place to access it. And still to this day, there's only like one place that many people don't know you can even go to where you can have a beer and a hamburger and look at the bay. What a lost opportunity. And it took me a long time to figure out what the heck is going on here. What a lost opportunity. So fast forward, and a guy who comes from an ecology background becomes the dean of a business school, okay? And we're working on our societal impact goals for the college. And we collectively talk about options. And we say one of the things we should do is really try to help elevate the importance of water for our economy in the future prosperity of this region. And to my pleasure, the faculty were all on board. So we set one of our goals to nurture northeastern Wisconsin's freshwater economy in a sustainable way. And so this is one of our first activities that we're trying to do to raise the sort of consciousness about what should we be doing to prepare this community for the opportunities that lie ahead. And I think, you know, Peter, you did just an amazing job sort of talking about how important water has been historically, both in creating culture, driving economies, the way people view water, particularly when it's not theirs, right? And sort of setting the stage that it's only going to become more important in the future. So I think we're really lucky to have you here today. And my question to kick things off then is, so you've got this group of interested people, influencers, right? One of our most important leaders in the community. What advice do you have to this group about how we should think about this water resource as an opportunity for this community to really prepare itself to take advantage of it?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the big debate that's going on in the region right now is, are the hordes going to come, climate migrants, things like that, for this water? Is industry going to lead the way? And if so, is the region ready? Is the region ready from a community sustainable development standpoint? And is that going to change real estate prices? And where are the workers going to live? And so I think that it's really important for communities like Green Bay to be thinking in decadal scales. I know that, I'm sure they are, but even more so from that water jobs interface and how to recruit different companies here because of the water, because of the sustainability ethic, and start planning for what's to come in an organized fashion, because we see all the time these cases where things change and the workers can't afford to live near where their jobs are and those kinds of things. And the other thing I also say is, take a kid down to the water and tell them how cool it is, because we take it for granted when we're here, and it's really important for children to understand that, you know, these are like the Himalayas of water where we are here. And we look out and, you know, and people come from all over the world and they go, wow, I can't see the other side. And we're used to not seeing the other side. But so there's that other little thing about take a kid down, tell them how cool it is.
Yeah, thanks. And that you said they go to the shore and they can't see the other side. So everybody can point it out on a map, but when they get here, if they've never been here, people cannot imagine a lake of the scale it is. We are fortunate to be doing some work with the Pew Charitable Trust on a project, and a gentleman came up from Florida and drove up, of course, from Milwaukee up to work with us here in Green Bay, and all he could talk about was, oh my gosh, all this waterfront real estate at such a low price, and what an amazing opportunity. And it looks like an ocean. It's the ocean. And like, again, that global perspective of, you know, what outsiders experience when they come see it, and kind of how much we tend to take some of the stuff for granted because it's here every day, right? And so, Troy, for you, I'd like to ask, so I'm going to talk about climate change for a second. All right. And one of my critiques of climate change in the media is it's always sort of painted as a homogeneous thing, right? They try to talk about nuances, but I think it kind of comes across as, well, things are going to get warmer and, but the reality is the changes are going to be really heterogeneous, right, in the way that they respond. And I think in so many things, perception's reality. There was a study that just came out not too long ago by the National Academy of Sciences, and they had all these climate indicators, kind of like your Duluth comment, Peter, your example. And across the board, Brown County came out as one of the absolute winners with climate change. I know that sounds weird to say, but think about it from an outsider's perspective. It's going to be warmer. You're going to have a bunch of fresh water. Real estate is relatively cheap compared to the rest of the country, right? You have abundant fresh water, not only for me to drink, but if I wanted to put a factory there. So I'm really interested to get sort of your perspective as the county exec on the types of conversations and planning that you're trying to lead our team, our government team, to help prepare to make those right choices that Peter reflected on. Bring the right industries here, prepare for growth, things like that.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity. It's kind of funny when I'm looking through the crowd. I'm not sure. Is that better? Yep. It's kind of funny because I look through the crowd and I see a lot of different faces during my journey as a county exec. I can say safely that I didn't really know much about water. I was that kid that came down, grew up in Ashwaubenon, played in the Dutchman Creek, occasionally went down to the Fox River and went swimming in there, but didn't really understand the magnitude of what we actually have here. And it wasn't until I got elected 2011 that I met Bill Haves, and then Nick is here, who's with our Land and Water Conservation Department. Bill was in that position. He basically said, Troy, you have a $100 million problem. And Brown County could help address that issue if we got our act together and we got landowners and the municipalities to start thinking business-wise and how we can protect this precious resource. And Nathan over here with New Water, Tom Sigmund was in his spot before, but there was a conversation about what do we do, and ironically, Lisa's sitting to the left of me, and we decided we were going to create a phosphorus committee. So you kind of get to this point of, early on, there was the economics that was being discussed, and it was more about trying to be in compliance with the Clean Water Act and trying to address that. But Bill Hayes was charging us to think differently about how to address the issue, because you can spend, as he would put it, the $100 million at the end of the pipe to basically clean, I think it was 3%, 50%, versus you could go upriver and work with the landowners and do so much better in the end. And so that's where we kind of started talking about the phosphorus committee. We were able to get the biodigester down in this other southern part of Brown County, the Lower Fox demonstration farms, all working with landowners to try to do better work in partnerships with the Oneida Nation and New Water and University of Wisconsin Green Bay. But the last thing we learned was that it's not just Brown County. So we could implement every strategy possible and then find out that actually 50% of it's coming from Lake Winnebago. And so we needed other counties to get into the fold, and they were getting, they created Winnebago waterways prior, but the reality was that we needed the Northeast Wisconsin Water Pact, and that's what we formed. I think it was in 2019, where the 5 counties and Oneida Nation came together and said, we're collectively wanting to protect this fresh water for multiple different reasons, and all collectively put dollars into, whether it's in more in our land and water departments or into the Foxwolf watershed, to have a joint position. I see Randall Lawton sitting over there, and Randall was one of the first guys I called in 2014 and said, hey, we need to create a research park because we need to have innovation happening here. We can't have brain drain. We need to have brain gain, and we should be solving global issues right here because we have the research right here. We're an area of concern. We have waste stream problems. We have all these things that we could probably generate the solutions right at this university. And so we started talking about a research park, which we learned that we needed an engineering school, and so we worked on getting an engineering school. The point being is that there's global problems. I think what they laid out in 2008, as far as the Global Compact or the Great Lakes Compact, really allows us to set the stage as far as how do we turn the economic engine of this region, most importantly Brown County, in the University of Wisconsin Green Bay, as that innovator to solve global issues around land management and water quality, and hopefully that then can help other parts around the world resolve their water issues so they're not bringing the big straw and dropping it into the Great Lakes to divert it. So I think there's all kinds of opportunities. I think it requires governments to be enacted or engaged. So the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, that $300 million that we get from the federal government, I just talked about it at the Port Symposium and how important it is for us to make sure that we protect that money coming in. But we also found out today that we lost the Climate Smart money, which is somewhere around $700,000 that Brown County won't be able to invest back with the landowners. I wanted to say Oliver Buke's in the audience, and we talked about the flow of people wanting to come to the region. He's a futurist and was hammering away about 4 years ago saying, hey, Brown County, Northeast Wisconsin, state of Wisconsin, you got to wake up. People are going to be coming because of the droughts, because of the heat waves, and we have this big thing called Lake Michigan. So that would be my answer.
That's a good answer. Oh. All right. Thank you, Troy. It's a great answer. So I'm going to build on that idea of global leadership here as we transition to Lisa. So I was reading something the other day, a story about Texas. And College Station, which I think that's Texas A&M, right? Yeah. So they're suing the city of Houston right now over some water issues. And so a lot of tech, new industry moving into the Texas area. A lot of it's water dependent. Right? And back to this idea that many of us don't think about the industries that we have here and how water dependent they are. Dairy, manufacturing. We'll come to paper products here soon. But it was interesting. So in Texas, they treat water rights. If you capture it, you keep it. Okay? So very different mentality than this compact idea, right? And so these venture capital firms are coming out of California and buying up ranches around College Station because there's an aquifer under there that doesn't reach down to Houston. And they're putting in high capacity wells and then pumping that down to Houston to support the growth, both in industry and the population. And so College Station saying this is a threat to our future economic development. So they're now trying to stop this, but I don't know if they'll be successful. Where I'm going with this is the use of water is also shifting in that it's not only the way to drive new industry developments and clusters, but it's also a really important emerging technology on how do you sort of recycle and reuse the water that you do gain access to. And in fact, Peter's most recent book, Purified, talks a lot about this sort of recycle, reuse concept. And so Lisa's done some amazing things with Georgia Pacific. And I'll butcher this, so you fix me here, right? But so paper manufacturing uses a lot of water. That's why it's here, right? But Lisa helped to develop this net zero water certification, the first in the world, as I recall from our conversation a couple years ago or so. And I didn't tell her this at the time. I'll fess up to it now. But I remember I left that conversation one really impressed that plant built the standard for net zero water use for the entire planet. It's the first one in the world. So that local expertise contributing to the globe. But I also thought a lot about like, wow, why we got a lot of water here. Why do that here? What was the motivation for Georgia Pacific to be a global leader in water reuse, recycling, and efficiency when we have so much water here? So I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about that journey, that story, and kind of the role that you guys could play in helping to bring that sort of global expertise to help develop maybe non-competitive industries to the region.
No, thank you. And just for the slaughter, it's Green Bay Packaging, which is better than Georgia Pacific.
Oh my gosh.
Because we actually are, we're born.
I'm sorry, you should have kicked me while I was doing
George
it.
Crest would roll over. The Green Bay Packaging actually was born out of Green Bay, so that's definitely heritage, their legacy. And that's, kind of bodes too that they could have sited this mill somewhere else, water or no water, right? And there was the legacy that this is where the company started and they wanted to keep it there, so they made it work at that spot, and they wanted to keep the workforce and the community, well-being of the community. But, to the water, George Crest, the founder, he was kind of an inventor, tinkerer, one of the first in the world to add recycled to virgin. He wanted to see, always mixing with the oatmeal formula, the recipe, And we also were the first to have a closed processed water system. So we bacteria shock and all, it's not, like a pool or whatever, but that chemistry and stuff. And so when we were building the new mill and looking at like the reach of technology and innovation, what's out there now, what could we do? We wanted to keep it closed, but we needed to have more treatment, and we recognized that. And we did not want to go and put into the traditional aeration ponds and do like everybody usually does and discharge it. We didn't want to do that. And so it was looking at what's out there in the world, open up the cookbook, see what mills were out there. They looked, there's one in California. In Ontario, California has kind of a purple water where the industry recycles water. And we looked at other technology. And that's where, to continue on with that closed loop, but we needed to do more. And we didn't want to replicate that model. So it was looking at, new water right next down the road. So it was kind of that sweet spot, it was not inexpensive. It cost more to do it, the piping and just other stuff. So with that reclaimed municipal water, being the first to like actually get certified to do it, that model of it, it was really to keep that same commodity value to the water and treat it, use it. We recycle it. So for some that aren't as familiar, our 100% recycled mill here, we built a new one, became full operational in 2022. And in that, our discharge goes to the New Water Municipal Sewage District. It's treated. And then they go through their secondary aeration and clarifier, and then before when they discharge water to the Fox River, but we have a split stream that comes back to us. And that pipe replaces that reclaimed municipal wastewater, replaces our demand on fresh water that we'd otherwise buy from the city for. So that was an alternative for us to use that. When that water comes back to us, we do ultrafiltration and reverse osmosis, which takes a lot out, and then we use it in our process. We recycle water in a smaller, like 30 to 40 times. We downstream it. So if we do really clean water for one process and not so clean, we utilize that, so we do a lot. And then we have an on-site anaerobic digester, which is like a kidney. We use it to clean our water to use it, but then we also use it to clean it before we send it back to the municipality for to knock down the COD, chemical oxygen demand. So we use that system there, and that's where when we're looking at the math of like even like net zero energy and the greenhouse stuff like that, why couldn't we apply that to water? And I remember first looking at this, and their leadership's like, we're investing a lot, we got to communicate and message it, and I think when I did a net zero water, there probably was like 5 things that popped up. And one was an Army base. It was very limited. Now you pull it up and it's just, it's a lot. And so I checked on how they look at that similar to like renewable energy and, fossil fuel and how you offset and stuff. So I think we have that math and kind of touched it off. And then we, actually reached out to 3 international standards board to see if they'd be a partner, and Underwriters Lab was definitely, they actually had Google and other people in Asia that wanted to do this for buildings. So we were kind of the pilot, and that's where the standard came. We wanted a standard because it was like, we got the best burger in town. When you get that third-party verification, your math is solid, and somebody else, so we wanted that. So this last year, I think we diverted or avoided 295 million gallons, and that is just avoided. That's not even looking at the water that we replaced with that reclaimed water that would have been otherwise fresh water. So it would be even bigger than that. But how they do the math, that's how we're. So, part of it is that the business model, and when we talk about phosphorus and now like PFAS and there's all this emerging chemistry, looking at the uncertainty of some of this regulatory, because water is going to become more and more regulated because with the climate change or just even the urbanizational expansion, there's more need for water. So just kind of knowing some of that, we wanted some more certainty, which there's never pure certainty, because new water still is a patron to it, and so it's not like we're totally, but it gave us some water resilience, and it was a good win-win for the community water resource and for our business. So that's what we chose to do. It took a village because appreciative New Water and the county and then also the city for our stormwater of that. But it was, when something's new, it's uncomfortable. And sometimes that's like the shock. It took a while to kind of come to a comfort level because I can understand like our processed water coming in, which is probably 10% of the hydraulic load for them, that we weren't going to blow them out and make everybody else pay for our business. That was not. So we pay our share. We definitely, we're a partner with them on capital and stuff like that. So we're not even paying the volume. We're paying other additional because we've invested in the community. Yeah, this is where we want to stay, and we want to have that investment, not only in our business, but the community as well. We also, because we were limited with our size of property, we actually, the city partnered, and we have an off-site stormwater pond with other stuff, and so we actually don't even have stormwater that goes off our property. It is pumped and sumped to a retention pond like 3 blocks away. So which is because how it was, real estate was a commodity there. But it's been a very successful business model. We have companies and brands come from all over the world to tour the mill. We got other mills to look at it as well. So it's kind of one of those. There's other potential for it, I'm sure, but it's got to fit your water use and on that. So.
Well, it's certainly an amazing story. Another great example of how things in Little Green Bay are really leading the world, right? And there's lots of examples. There's so Green Bay Packaging. We've got the Fox River Cleanup. New Water's been a pioneer in the adaptive land use for cleaning water, and on and on and on. So thank you for that story. And I think my misspeaking also tells everybody why they moved me out of the classroom and into the dean's office. I'm pretty good at that. My apologies. Thank you for your graciousness. I think it's also a great cue that we should be moving on to audience questions. So at this point, we'd love to take some. And I think we'll be bringing a microphone down or around. There we go. The gentleman right there.
Thank you. Peter, I guess this question is for you. About 30 years ago, I worked on a project with the Kewanee Nuclear Power Plant when the quagga mussels were starting to move in and become a problem. They wanted to go to groundwater for cooling water instead of Lake Michigan. They put in a small well. Granted, it was within 500 yards of the lake, and we measured within less than 24 hours, we had drawn down that water table outside on the land enough so that we were now drawing in Lake Michigan water. In those narrow bands near the Chicago-Milwaukee area, those communities would be drawing a whole lot more water. Would that be considered a diversion from the Great Lakes, and would the compact cover that?
Starting out with a real tough question here. And I'll try, there is an answer, but I've tried to do it really simply. So the 1967 Supreme Court case that set the limit at 2.1 billion gallons was because there was so much groundwater withdrawal underneath the city of Chicago and the suburbs as they were running out of water. And so they needed the water for drinking, not diverting to flush their sewage. And so that number actually comes from a groundwater crisis, which has now moved down to Joliet, Illinois. And so Joliet, as you may know, has some of the most drawn down groundwater in the Great Lakes region, if not the country. So they are now piping water from Chicago. They cut $1 billion deal to pipe water from Chicago to make up for that unsustainable water practice. So the Chicago diversion is grandfathered under the Great Lakes Compact. Illinois is the only state that has permission to send their water outside the Great Lakes watershed. And there's a big fight in the compact negotiating room because other states said, you have to be under the same rules that we are. You can't send water anymore outside the Great Lakes watershed. Illinois said, hey, we're the only ones who's beholden to the 9 justices of the Supreme Court in this room, so we already have our hurdle. We don't need a new hurdle. And then Illinois said, we're out of the compact if this is what you're going to do. And they're like, well, wait, we can't have the biggest diversion in the Great Lakes region not be signing on to the Great Lakes Compact. So the short answer is that in the state of Illinois, under the Supreme Court decree, the justices didn't get into the weeds on where the watershed line is and things like that. You can actually send Lake Michigan water anywhere in the state of Illinois if you wanted to under the Supreme Court decree. I think the economics will make that impossible. But yeah, very high level question. Thank you. I hope to give you an answer there that you're looking for. Yeah, okay.
Well, and I just add on hydrology, that not all wells are, it depends how it's replenished, because it could have a shelf and it could be, a different aquifer, and they don't all connect. I mean, all hydrology is, evaporation and that, but that doesn't mean they all will end up being replenished for the Great Lakes. They'll just give you air. They'll just dry up. So that's not always going to be the case.
Dave Byrne, O'Connell County. On our boundary waters of the Menominee River, we have the Back 40 mine wanting to come into this country with their ISO standards, industrial standards of operation. And if they get grandfathered with those rules, they can run the environment under the rules of their country, which our legislative body says they don't have jurisdiction over it. But here in this part of the Great Lakes, talking about the compact, we have Menominee, Michigan, Marinette County, Oconto, Brown, Kewaunee, and Dorr. This is the largest freshwater ecosystem of the Great Lakes on the earth. And we are kind of trying to protect it with the sanctuaries and the estuaries. If this mine goes through, they're saying they can filter it with the bedrock about 150 yards from the Menominee River with AMD acid mining discharge, which is the sulfuric acid, kind of the same thing that comes off the paper mills. Once it's in our bay, it's there for the life of the earth. It'll never go away. Has any of your group addressed this? The Back 40 mine. It's out of Canada.
A number of years ago, Brown County, by the way, Semper Paratus, is that Coast Guard on your head?
Yes, it is. Thank you.
My dad's the retired Coast Guard. The Brown County Board, I want to say 2017 passed a resolution basically protesting. It wasn't necessarily, protesting wasn't the right word, but I guess it was protesting that mine coming through because of the impact that it would have on the Great Lakes fishery. And we know the fishery is roughly 250 million annually. The Great Lakes, what it brings from a recreational standpoint. But Brown County government weighed in. Now, of course, the state of Wisconsin representatives at the time were saying, why are you weighing on an issue that we have no jurisdiction? This is a Michigan issue. And so that's that's the only thing I can say about this.
I have heard of the mine. I have not done reporting on the mine, so I'm really not in a position to comment on it. And so I apologize for that. But it is on the list, and so I will look into it. But I don't have enough background to make a comment today. I apologize.
Yes, back in August of 2017, the coalition people of the back 40 went door to door to each county government looking for support. But they did not, I say back in August of 2017, the coalition of the people did go door to door with the local government looking for support, but they never did receive legislative protection. So that right now we have the fourth company going bankrupt, and the last company was out of New Mexico, and they're gaining steam right now with precious metals.
So Peter, thank you for looking into that. Next question.
Just a quick comment about the groundwater withdrawal. The groundwater divide and the surface water divide down in that southeastern Wisconsin are not the same. So it is possible that pumping water could be drawing up Great Lakes water outside of the rim of the Soup Bowl, as Peter talked about. So that is really complex down in the Waukesha area. My question is for Lisa, and I'm just wondering about, is there opportunity for your business model to capture the sort of sustainability footprint that you're putting onto your product, in essence, by treating the water in a sustainable way? And I'm wondering if you realize that at all in any branding of your paper, of the products you create, and so on.
Yeah, we could, we have 2 box plants in town that are actually, one of them is our largest one in the company. Because it's in the same watershed, we could put net zero water packaging. We just haven't, found the brand to market to do it in the way of so that is something, but it would have to be in the watershed, and it could be Michigan too. We have a couple other plants. That is part of the mix. It just hasn't something that, came up. I think with the mill having it, there has really brought a lot to our brand without doing that. And I think with some of our plants, we have like 46 plants in 16 states. It would get a little bit more like we supply sometimes to large brands from multiple states and stuff. So we kind of have kept a uniform supply at that point. But yeah, we definitely could do that.
If I could just, Dean Dornbush, I could just jump in here out of turn. So I came in early to tour Lisa's plant. As Dean said, I just published a book on water recycling, so I was really keen to see what they were doing here, and it just blew me away. I mean, you have a global leader right here. It's exactly the kind of thing that we're talking about. And I hope you don't regret me saying that if you haven't toured this plant, you should tour this plant. It is globally significant from a sustainability standpoint and a water standpoint, what they are doing here. And it is exactly the kind of water and sustainability leadership that we need in this region. And to see the private sector leading the charge because it wants to, is truly a role model kind of a thing. So hats off. Yeah, really cool.
Thank you. Regionally too, we get other invites to speak, and one was the Global Water Summit in Paris. I could have expensed that, not quite. J'y habite, Green Bay. I'm taking French class, so not for that reason. But yeah, thank you. It's just, it is something that has really elevated our brand. People recognize us, that sets us apart because we have taken this initiative above and beyond. So thank you.
The interesting thing is that, Brown County, you talked about, I think we call it the Fox River corridor, sewer corridor that you talked about, that offsite water retention pond. But in order for Brown County to support this endeavor, obviously New Water was a big part of this. I think our cost was roughly $9 million. Part of the sell to Brown County was the whole sustainability. It was the fact that they were going to create this closed loop system. We had a number of supervisors who were very concerned about the protection of our water. And once we realized not only the global capacity of this company staying in Green Bay, but just the fact that they were going to put us on the spotlight as far as a community that has a private company that's doing a public-private partnership to protect its one crucial resource, really was what got all of us unanimously to really support their efforts. And it's really it's great to hear that in these type of public-private partnerships, we can see such a beneficial win-win. I think Paul Linsmeyer used to call it the triple win, where you did environment, the economy, and I forgot what the other one was. Yeah, but regardless, just the fact.
So with that, we actually have come to the end of our time. So please join me in thanking the panel and Peter Annan, our speaker. And as mentioned previously, we do have a reception with hors d'oeuvres and bar out to the left and up the hallway in our Mary Conference Hall in our winter gallery. Winter garden will be indoors, but we'll look outside. There are books for purchase right outside the door, and at the reception, Peter will be signing books. So thank you all for coming.